Kenyon started a Spanish language newspaper last semester called Medio Camino, and even though I'm in New Zealand, I was lucky enough to contribute to it. I've had a few of y'all ask me what I wrote, because you can't read Spanish, which is fair, so I figured I'd do a reading. Honestly, I took some time to think about whether I should translate it and do a reading, because it's a piece about my Latinidad, a word I refuse to translate to Latinness because that just loses so much. Ultimately, I decided to go through with it because although language is a cornerstone of culture, as you'll hear me say again in a second, it's not the only road to culture. This isn't a direct one-to-one translation. I don't consider this any more or less canon than the original Spanish, which isn't even the original. I wrote it in Spanglish and translated it from there. Then got significant help editing it. Did you know that Kenyon has some really good, kind, helpful folks? Enough preamble. If you want to read along in either Spanish or English, I put the text on my Tumblr and links in the Dooblydoo. Here is Latinidad mezclada. Someone called me white the other day. I have white skin, like most people here in New Zealand, where I am right now, but I'm not white. How can I defend this contradiction? Easy. No one white in the American context has to deal with jokes like, you must be really good at jumping fences. Normally when I get these jokes I respond with something about my mixed identity, but when someone asks me which side gave me my Latinidad, I don't have an answer. My dad was born in a town in the south of Colombia called Meva. He has family from Colombia that stretches far back from Spain past the Inquisition. I clearly get my Latinness from him, no? Well, no. When I think of people who speak Spanish in my house, my dad isn't the first person to come to mind. He moved to Texas when he was 4 years old, and he forgot his Spanish and had to relearn it in college. My cousins from his side live in the US, speak primarily English, and look white like me. I've only been to Colombia 3 times, and one of them I was less than 3 years old. I've gotten more Latinx culture from my mom, who grew up in Costa Rica. I visit Costa Rica more frequently, including having lived and studied there, and my cousins from there speak Spanish and fit Costa Rican stereotypes. I associate Spanish a lot more with my mom, and it doesn't hurt that she writes and edits Spanish textbooks. She even taught some Spanish to my class in 1st grade, and has always been the person to go to practice Spanish. But Latinidad isn't just the culture. My mom was born in Barcelona, her mom was born in France, and her father is German-Bolivian. My mom has a French passport. Is she Latina? If you measured Latinness by blood, my dad has more, but if you knew my mother, the answer would be of course. My grandmother was raised in Venezuela and my mom in Costa Rica. Though neither of them were born in Latin America, they were raised immersed in Latinx culture. And language is not the only road to culture. My dad is an artist and has made works on the war on drugs in Colombia and the border between El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. His art is full of Latinidad. Moreover, if I can claim that I'm Latino for suffering racist jokes, my dad can claim the same thing by getting shot at with BB guns by his neighbors while walking home from school in his neighborhood in San Antonio. I'm mixed, yes, but between what and what? White and Latino, Tico and Colombiano, Latin and American, English and Espanol, culture and blood, birth and place? How can I pick apart my identity when my parents' identities are already so complicated and confusing? I'm Latinx. I'm American, I'm Tico, I'm Colombian. I am a minority, but I'm white, but I'm a person of color? All of that description is true and false because when your identity comes from a mixed culture, you can't have a definition without contradictions. And I'm comfortable with the contradictions because to be Latinx is to be confused. Thanks. I'll see you next week. Actually, maybe I want to unpack the end a little bit there. I think context is really important when it comes to sort of the whole of my writing and when it comes to the whole of being Latinx, because to say those kinds of things in the context of New Zealand or the United States is very different than to say those things in the context of the rest of Latin America. If I were to call myself a person of color in Costa Rica or Colombia or Chile or Peru, that would not be good because there's a wide shade of Latinx people. And I am on the white spectrum. But when it comes to the United States, being white passing, the passing part is very important because although my skin is white, the opportunities afforded to me and the racism that I have to go through, systematic and personal, puts me in the category of non-white, and synonymous with non-white is person of color. That isn't very comfortable in a lot of ways, and that's what I mean when I say I'm comfortable with the contradictions more than I am with the definitions themselves. Because to define myself as Latinx is to wrap up a whole bunch of other pieces, including things that maybe I'm not wholesale, but culturally sort of have me in there. I think with that, I'll actually see you next week.